Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. It's the Monday, July 13th, 2026 episode of the Marco Geray Show, the only show where the facts are facts and our truths thrive. We've got lots to discuss today, everybody, so let's dive right in head first with the biggest story that broke over this weekend. That, of course, was the death of Senator Lindsey Graham. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card over the weekend, and it certainly was unexpected, to say the least. But we were told late Saturday evening, early Sunday morning, that he had died of a sudden illness. Now, I know on this program I've vehemently disagreed with Senator Lindsey Graham on a host of different stances he's taken, on war, positions he's taken that I believe oppose American interest, in my own estimation. And he's discussed human life in a way that I disagree with. He's advocated for bombing various countries. Now, as a gentleman, if I can't say anything nice today, I simply just won't say anything at all. And I implore everybody else out there that may have disagreed with Lindsey Graham to do exactly the same. There's no reason to champion somebody dying just simply because you disagree with them. So we'll just leave it at that, I believe, and I pray that people will at least be respectful because, yes, folks, we could disagree with Lindsey Graham on, again, a number of issues. No doubt about it. I did it on my show all the time. I disagree with policy positions he's taken up, but I've also agreed with some that he has as well. That doesn't mean you should certainly hate people or champion, again, people dying. That's simply just uncalled for. I think we have to be better than that, folks. That's my take on that. But I do want to delve into this because there is something that is rotting in Denmark here, I believe, and it's not just the cheese. So what are we actually being told? What do we know? What happened? That's what I want to say. They said Graham died after a sudden and brief illness. What the hell does that mean? A brief and sudden illness that killed him? Now, what they're suggesting, though, that he died on Saturday, that'd be July the 11th, of an aortic dissection due to arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So I said to myself, okay, that makes sense. He's 71 years old. He just had a long trip coming back from Ukraine that takes roughly 14 to 16 hours, and it's a lot of stress on you. No doubt about it. That could definitely be the case that happened here. And the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department noted that a comprehensive toxicology and microscopic testing will take place to determine whether there are any substances in his body at any time to figure out exactly maybe what could have caused this or accelerated it. Now, they did say that the EMS personnel responded to a call for cardiac arrest at Graham's home on Capitol Hill on Saturday evening. And this is where I start to go, okay, this is interesting. So this is late Saturday evening. And who's making the call? Was it Lindsey Graham himself? Did he have chest pains? That's a common symptom of the aortic dissection. This is what happens in an aortic dissection is simply think of it as your aorta, which is your biggest artery. The inner lining begins to split. This has to do with plaquing and what have you. The vessel opening tends to narrow over time because of the plaquing. But what happens is the blood ends up pulling apart the vessel lining. So there's blood that's getting in between the lining of the vessel. All right. And over time, what happens is builds up, and it can eventually rupture the entire artery, which would be, again, devastating. You would die extremely quickly if that were the case, which does happen, by the way. But this is basically, think of the artery itself collapsing upon itself and eventually breaking. That could be one scenario of which causes death. But what they were suggesting in this, though, is that somebody had to have been with him if it wasn't obviously himself that was calling. So could he have woken up in the middle of the night and said, geez, my chest is killing me. I've got to go to the hospital. I've got to call. And the EMS shows up and he dies. That's certainly a possible scenario. Absolutely. Again, lots of stress. He was just in Ukraine for the past couple of days. Long trip, long travel. An older guy, absolutely, possibly true. Absolutely. But then I kept looking at various things that were taking place because I said, well, okay, well, what was his trip actually about? And of course, we know that he was meeting with Zelensky, among other people, that he was discussing things like air defense systems. President Trump has this grand idea now that we have to start giving the Ukrainians these Patriot missiles now, giving them the technology which they can build their own. I guess at least we're not giving them ours that we don't have. They were also talking about Russian sanctions. They were talking about broader diplomatic efforts. Lindsey Graham has been a proponent of this war, fighting Putin. He has gone on to champion Russians to go in and assassinate Putin. I mean, this is who Lindsey Graham was. There was never a war that he didn't really like. That's just who he was. So we can say that. We can acknowledge that, of course. But then I said to myself, okay, so when was he there? Obviously, he must have gotten back fairly soon. And I kept going through clips. I kept going through searches. Where was he? What did he actually do on this trip? And on the 10th, so that would be the Friday, obviously before his passing, he made a press conference in Ukraine to say the following. Take a listen.
I'm pleased to announce, as of about 30 minutes ago, we've reached agreement with the White House on a version of the Russian sanctions bill that they will support. It means it's going to become law. So when I get back to Washington, I'm going to go with Senator Blumenthal to the Republican and Democratic leader to see if we can find time to move this Russian sanctions package that would give tools to President Trump to help end this war.
Now, I disagree with this position, first and foremost, just so we're all clear that I think sanctions are going to stop this war, certainly not stop Russia's advancement inside of Ukraine, certainly not by a long shot. But then I started looking too. So, okay, he's there advocating for, again, the missiles, this and that. Okay, fine, whatever. But then I started looking at some other articles. And this popped up out of the International Business Times here. This one is going to make you kind of go, okay, something's a little odd here. Now, it appears that a Ukrainian drone production facility inside of Kyiv was among several defense industrial sites targeted in a large Russian missile and drone attack on the same day as Lindsey Graham's tour of the Skyfall factory at which he was in, and described it as a state-of-the-art facility, far more advanced than anyone else on the planet. This is his own words. This is what he's telling us. So he's there on the 11th. So that tells me a couple things. One, that he had to have probably been there fairly late on the day, on the 11th, to go through this tour. Obviously, he probably met with Zelensky that day, too, was given this long tour. So I highly doubt he woke up at, 5 a.m. to go look at this facility and then got on a plane and left. Or a train, rather. That's how they have to get into Ukraine now. But the idea that there was an attack on this facility, I mean, obviously the timing certainly prompts some questions about the security arrangements for dignitaries coming to this facility, which he was definitely in because we have photos of him. We literally have photos of him being in this facility, taking pictures with drones, taking pictures with people. So he was definitely there. That being said, the question remains, could it be possible that Lindsey Graham was in this facility when it was struck? I think so. I really do. And the reason I say this to you is not just to be provocative or to go off on some tangent as to what could have happened. The reason I say this was because I saw this from Kash Patel. He took to X and he said Senator Lindsey Graham was a devout public servant, fierce defender of our nation. He goes on. And then in the final sentence, though, he says that the FBI is assisting local authorities and has made every necessary resource available. And that's when I kind of said, wait a minute now. So he's in this facility. It's struck by the Russians. So obviously there's a barrage of missiles coming into exactly where he is. He's right at the heart and center. On the day of, now we haven't gotten a timestamp on when he was there. Again, he could have completely not been there. Could have been very shocking to him. He could have witnessed what took place. Again, stress on the body when you have cardiovascular disease could cause, obviously, the condition to advance. No doubt about it. But the idea that if he died from cardiovascular disease, why would then the FBI be involved in this? What would be the purpose of that? Unless, of course, there was some sort of foul play or he died under other circumstances, right? Because then that provides needed for an investigation. Very, very possible. So I thought that was, again, a bit strange. It kind of puts you in another position. Why would they be involved if he had a health condition? Doesn't make any sense. What would the FBI need to do that for? Now, the other thing as well that I asked myself too, and I've seen this idea cross over the internet, and again, I'm not saying this is true at all, folks. I'm just telling you what's being said out there so we can kind of analyze things and make sense of it. Some people are suggesting that he could have possibly been poisoned while he was in Kyiv. Now, if the Russians know he's there, it is possible. There's these certain types of poison, though, they can use that kind of take place after you've ingested it, so it doesn't happen just right away. That's another possibility. It certainly could happen. So could he have gone home and the poison took effect and he was with people, or he felt something happening and he called the ambulance service, 911? Sure, of course. That could definitely be the case too. But then I said to myself, okay, let's say he was in Kyiv on that Saturday. We know he was in Kyiv, no doubt about it. He was at this facility. They documented he was there. He was taking a tour. He's being shown all this. I then said to myself, okay, if he was there on Saturday, it's a 7-hour time difference. So Ukraine is about 7 hours ahead of the United States on the East Coast. All right. He's said to have died late on July 11th, Saturday evening. Okay. So in order for him to really make it back in time for all this, to get back to the United States, he probably would have had to have left probably by noon on the 11th. Would have definitely have to have left probably by that time. So that'd be 5 a.m. on East Coast time. It takes roughly 14, usually 16 hours just to get to where he's going. So he's got to take a train all the way back to Poland. He's got to get on a plane, a military plane, come back to the United States. You have to figure he's got to take at least, this isn't equated into the travel time, but he's got to land, he's got to get his belongings, he's got to get in his vehicle, he's got to be, taken back to his location in D.C. And then, of course, this has to take place after all that. So let's say, again, he leaves Ukraine at noon. We'll be generous. We'll say he left at noon. If from that moment of which he leaves at noon, 16 hours later, you're looking at least 9 o'clock that he maybe arrives back in the United States. Then he's got to get off the plane. Then he's got to get all of his things, and he's got to be then transported back to his home. That's taking you into probably at least after 10 p.m. And then he dies within the 2 hours in which he gets back. So he's cutting it pretty close if that's the real case. If he did leave at noon. Now, I don't know when he left. I can't get a time. I've searched everywhere. When was he in this facility? Can't get anything on it. And again, we don't know the time of which the facility was struck as well. So I don't know if Lindsey Graham was even in Kyiv when it took place. He could have certainly been. If he was, that would raise even more questions because we know he was there at that location. So again, I'm going to be doing my damnedest to figure out exactly when he was there, specifically on that Saturday, and when he got back to the United States. Right now, we're not getting that information. But, if you're in a 7-hour time difference, you're going to be pretty jet lagged if you got there earlier in that couple days. Now, his birthday was on the 9th. So he had just turned 71. Now, again, I don't know. We don't know exactly what day he got there, but he definitely was there on the 10th because he met with Zelensky, and we definitely know he was there on the 11th because he was definitely in this facility that was hit by the Russians. So this sparks up a little bit of controversy, some speculation involved. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, it could simply just be the case he was an older man. He had years of cardiovascular disease. I just don't know why they would call it a sudden illness. To me, that's not a sudden illness. That is a chronic illness over the course of your lifetime, right? The plaquing usually starts taking place in the 30s. We lose that nitrous oxide in the bloodstream. We get over time, depending on diet and what have you. But he didn't seem ill in that video I saw on the 10th. Now, President Trump did say he even spoke to him that evening, which is very possible. He was a golfing buddy of his. Absolutely could be possible. But he then went home and spoke to him again. So really that window of time of which, if he died on the 11th in the United States, the window of which that happened would certainly be very, very small, folks. I just want to say that to you. So if Trump did speak to him, and again, talking about getting together, working on this, it's a very, very short amount of time in which that could really take place. Not saying it didn't happen. Definitely not saying that at all. But I'm just saying there are other things involved in this that really kind of say something doesn't really add up here. Very possible. Very slim, though, to me, in my estimation. So we'll keep an eye on this. We'll keep looking at what's going on. And again, my condolences to his family, folks. Again, I understand I disagree with Lindsey Graham. Wasn't very fond of Lindsey Graham, but however, this man does have family. This man does have friends. And we should always be respectful to people, okay? I mean, again, disagree with people all you want, but we should always, first and foremost, be the better people, be respectful. Not saying you have to agree with anybody. Not saying you have to like anybody, but be respectful, please. And this begs the question, too, though, that we move forward now. He was in a election year. He had just won the primary in South Carolina. And what has to take place now is that Governor McMaster then would likely appoint a temporary senator to take his place. We don't know who that would be yet. They're floating the idea of his sister being just put in for the interim period until January the 2nd, until the new senator would be sworn into office, of course. But what they'll have to do now is they'll have to have an emergency primary in South Carolina. They would probably have a special election on the 11th, I'm told, to vote for the new nominee for the Republican ticket. And that winner of that seat would then, that candidate for that seat would then obviously go into November to run against the Democrat, Dr. Annie Andrews. And then obviously that person would then succeed whoever McMaster's puts in that position afterwards. And if it's Graham's sister, I guess she would then run if she decides to do that, or if she's even considered for that position. There are other people I've been told they would like to be in that position. I'm hearing word of Nancy Mace is considering running for the Senate seat as well, that she didn't win her gubernatorial seat. So there's lots of different scenarios that are moving forward, but again, that slim margin, folks, for the Republicans is really starting to dwindle in both the House and the U.S. Senate. So I wanted to inform everybody on that, folks. We'll keep our eye on what's going on here, of course, and we'll see how things continue to work out. All right, let's move on, folks. Let's not waste any more time. Let's go on. We got lots to discuss, too, about this war in Ukraine, so that's obviously worth mentioning. Let's jump right into it right now. And it says here the U.S. military says it's striking Iran in response to attacks on civilian vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. Yep, the war's back on, folks. It's back on and in full swing. And probably not stopping anytime soon. My concerns, of course, about our oil infrastructure in the United States is very alarming, as you know. And this is a terrible misstep by the president, first and foremost. There's really no need for any of this. I don't like that we're doing this again. I don't see how anything we're doing is going to help our position at all. Certainly not by a long shot. But let's take a look at where we are. It says here that Iran said that the Strait of Hormuz was closed once again. So now the strait is closed. After a warning shot fired by its military struck a vessel using an unauthorized route in the critical waterway. So in other words, what we're saying here is that the vessels that are trying to transit the strait are now trying to go hug the Yemeni coastline and not use the Iranian coastline, which is what all the ships were directed to do, as per the Memorandum of Understanding, which is now 100% dead. So there is not even any framework of which to discuss with the Iranians because there is no understanding. We can't even come to an understanding of an understanding. That's where we are in this country right now. Now, U.S. CENTCOM has now said that a short time later that its forces began a third round of strikes against Iran because, hey, it didn't work the first 40 days. Let's try it again. That makes sense, doesn't it? I think not. So we had explosions in Bandar Abbas, Sharik, the two cities that are along the shores of Iran, right next to the Strait of Hormuz, both port cities, if you will. And it said that the United States is imposing a heavy cost by continuing to degrade Iran's ability to attack civilian mariners and commercial ships freely transiting the strait. This, again, is stupid. The Iranians made it very clear. Point number 5 in the Memorandum of Understanding, which I've said to you several times, folks, is that the Iranians will allow vessels to transit the strait under their arrangements. What are those arrangements? That you transit by first coordinating with the IRGC through the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. That's a system they put in place prior to this. You fill out the form, you fax it into them, and they guide you through the strait on the Iranian side of the strait. Very simple. There's no toll. You don't have to do anything, but you have to coordinate with the Iranians. And I think the reason why they're doing this, again, they have full range to do so, because again, this is in the understanding that the Iranians will again coordinate with these vessels that choose to transit the strait. Now, the United States is saying, well, no, we're going to have vessels coming through the Omani side. And the Iranians are saying, no, we are the ones in charge of this. The United States has no say in this. Certainly, that's what it says in the understanding. But that the Iranians will then coordinate with these vessels and they'll get them through. And by the way, I've challenged anyone that listens to my show. Show me any vessel, any mariner, any cargo ship, any container ship that worked with the Iranians of any flagship, that coordinated with them, that said, okay, we'll travel on the route of what you're telling us. Name me any of those vessels that were struck by the Iranians. You can't find one. And I know because I've looked. Now, you have the United States coming in now and saying, no. You can trade it on the Omani side. We'll help escort you through. Of course, they have only airspace above them. They're not having any vessels coming into the strait. That would obviously be detrimental. And we don't want to get our vessels too close to the Iranian coastline because they risk the chance of getting hit. But what we're doing is we're trying to bring the ships coming through the Omani side. The Iranians are saying, you're not listening to us. You have to coordinate with us if you want to transit still. That's the arrangement. You don't have to pay us, but you will coordinate with us, or else we will strike you. Again, this is all in the Memorandum of Understanding. And now that memorandum is now dead because of what the United States did. The United States has no business escorting ships through the strait. None at all. So what the U.S. did was they provoked the Iranians. Again, folks, this is what took place. We had no right to escort ships to travel to where they shouldn't be, defying what the Iranians have said is part of the deal. Yes, we'll escort you through. And by the way, why would you want to go through the route of which could possibly have sea mines in it? Again, I don't know why you would do that on your own. Certainly the United States doesn't know where they are. Even the Iranians don't even know where all of them are. That's a big problem, too. And that's also what's cutting down on traffic. But the idea that we went in and decided to do this during this interim period of which we're trying to negotiate, and then just suggesting that we have carte blanche to go tell ships where to go, certainly didn't help out the situation. Yet we're saying, oh, look what the Iranians are doing. Well, the Iranians are doing that because this is what they said. They gave out the warning earlier in the week that said, listen, you either listen to us or you will risk the chance of getting struck. And obviously we know that Qatari liquefied natural gas, the Al Rayqayyat, was hit. It was still able to transit, but it was struck and caused damage to the vessel. No casualties, but it was struck. And the U.S. used that as a means to then restart this war now, which we find ourselves in. Why couldn't the United States just simply butt out of it? They had no business being involved in it at all because they're not involved in it. There's nothing in the Memorandum of Understanding that said simply the U.S. and the Iranians will then allow the Omani sector and the Iranian sector to be utilized. We'll take one side, you take the other. That's not what it said. And so I question either Trump did not read this, or he's simply defying it, or he doesn't care what he signed. Both are bad. And this is why we find ourselves in now, folks. So now we're exchanging strikes against one another yet again. We have word, of course, that the Iranians have struck now 5 U.S. bases, even inside of Jordan as well. So this is definitely starting to creep back up. It's starting to get more intense as time goes on. I have been told, though, that the strikes are not as intense as they were in the first 40 days of this war. But now we're making a bad choice now. Now, we have Hegseth coming out saying, well, no, it's the Iranians that made a poor choice. Now they pay. Well, no, we're going to pay. We're paying through our oil infrastructure that's no longer here, Pete. What are you going to do with that when we have no oil to utilize for our warships, utilize for our diesel fuel, aviation fuel? How are we going to get our planes to move, Pete, if we have no oil coming into the United States, which is none? Maybe we get some from Venezuela, which takes even longer to refine because it's extremely sour, heavy crude oil that takes a much longer refining process. Folks, we don't produce this type of oil in the United States. That's what I think Trump understood at the beginning, which is why he signed this. But now he's totally going back on all this and thinking, okay, now that we've, I guess, restocked a little bit, now this will work all of a sudden. It'll work now that we bomb various sites, a bridge, a railway track here. It's not working. And it's not working for the same fact I told you on Friday's show. They already, on the day of which the line, which I believe was the Belt and Road, or it could have been the railway between Tehran and, where it was from Tehran to another city of the country. The United States struck it, and within hours, both lines of that track were rebuilt again. So essentially useless. Their engineers got back out there and laid the track again. My God, we should import them to California so we get the high-speed rail done. My God. You talk about incompetence. So we drop bombs on a railway. They go from city to city inside Tehran, and within hours, the line of the track was rebuilt again. I mean, Gavin Newsom, eat your heart out there, man. Come on. But this is what the Iranians are capable of. And from what I've heard from various people that have visited, they have said, for instance, a lot of what was struck, already you're seeing the rebuilding of what it was from the first 40 days. Already being rebuilt. So if we think that we're going to win this through air campaign and bombings, it's simply not going to work. And all it's doing, all this restarting of this war is doing, is causing the Iranian people to rally behind their government even more than what was done before this war even began. Which we knew. We had supporters in the streets of Iran. We saw this. There were people that witnessed this in the United States that were there at the National Rally Day, and they said there were 4 million people in the streets of Tehran alone, a city of 16 million people, in support of their government. That's not a small amount of people, folks. And by the way, the funeral processions, the ceremony itself, got anywhere from 40 to 45 million people total in attendance all throughout Iran. That's roughly half of the population that was out in the streets. Out in the streets in support of the government. It is the largest funeral ceremony in human history in terms of attendance. It's massive. And the United States is downplaying it, saying, oh, this Ayatollah wasn't very popular. This guy got 45 million people out in the streets for him that we know of. That can be documented. That is a lot of people, folks. Again, I tell you how it is. I don't tell you what I would like it to be. But certainly the Ayatollah was praised also in Iraq. We know that the casket was taken to various cities there. Again, as a high-ranking Shia cleric, of course, and the respects were paid inside of Iraq as well. You even have people in Iraq now that are asking to be deployed to fight in the Iranian army itself, in the Iranian military. That's how people view this, the assassination, the martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei. Again, you could agree with them, you could not agree with them. I'm just telling you the facts, folks. This is what's happening on the ground inside of Iran right now. You are causing many people to become very, I guess the word's patriotic about their government, because now they're backing it more now than ever. More than ever before. So in other words, you push the problems to an extreme that has caused the people to rise up, to hate the United States even more than they already did. And you also have a new generation of very young people that were too young or certainly weren't born yet during the Iran-Iraq War, of which the United States helped fund and give weaponry And the end result was the death of anywhere between 300 to 500,000 dead Iranians, 70,000 of which were civilians. Let that sink in for a second. So now you have a new generation of people that have witnessed their leadership in their country, the highest ranking government official, being killed, his wife being killed, his daughter-in-law being killed, his granddaughter being killed. By the way, their bodies were also laying to rest as well at the proceedings as well. But you have the Iranian people now very upset. And now we're bombing them yet again. This is not helping our cause. This is not causing more stability in the region. It's causing less stability. And on top of it, we now have an oil shortage right around the corner, folks, that nobody's talking about for reasons unknown to me. I don't know why. I can't explain it to you, folks. And if you think I'm just being facetious about it and you say, well, Gervais, come on. I was at the gas station the other day. We got plenty of gas. And I say, that's the wrong kind of gas we're talking about. I'm talking about diesel fuel. I'm talking about aviation fuel. I'm talking about fuel for our own military. What do you think our warships run on? They run on this heavy sour crude, of which we do not produce here in the United States. We have to get it imported. And by the way, I'm looking at this article on CNBC right now. It says here that oil jumps above $75 a barrel after Trump reinstates the Strait of Hormuz blockade on Iranian ships now. So now we have a massive blockade going on right now. Yep. Oh my goodness. Brent crude right now is topping $80 per barrel. So now we're moving back up, folks. And I told you before, it's only going to start going up. Only going to start going back up. West Texas Intermediate, same thing, $75 a barrel. Again, both over 5% higher just today. And now that we have this war in full-fledged, expect that number to continue to go up. Because now what has to set in, the investors on Wall Street, the CEOs of these oil companies, they have to realize at some point, we don't have the supply anymore. It's not coming in like it once was, and we're certainly not going to be getting it from the government anymore. Because we've reached the end of what we can utilize. Otherwise, we put ourselves in the situation where national security becomes a major, major problem. If, God forbid, a country were to invade the United States, we need to have that oil on hand to allow our ships to function and whatnot, to create, obviously, the deterrence to prevent any type of full-scale attack on the United States. We have to have that. So Trump has two decisions. We either just have no more diesel, we have no more aviation fuel, or we keep digging into our reserves, using about 8, 9, 14 million barrels per week, and then that number just keeps depleting. We have nothing coming in. And we need that oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf, among other countries. Russia's not sending us that heavy crude. Canada gives us some. Mexico has some. Venezuela has some. But we're not getting it in the amounts we need. That's the problem. This was all offset by the war that took place on February the 28th. And no one's saying anything about it. I don't know why. I'm hearing some rumblings about it. And then we get word from President Trump now, again, just championing this war. He's talking about the Strait of Hormuz again, as if this means something positive is going to happen as a result of doing this, which I don't believe. Listen to clip 2.
Well, we're taking over the strait. They have nothing. They've got nothing. So something that nobody knows, yesterday they had an 11-hour meeting. Everything's 11 hours with these guys. You know, you can't settle a one sentence in 1 hour and 1 minute. And everything was agreed to yesterday. And they leave the room. They call back and they say, we had to make a couple of changes. I said, changes? They got to make changes? We're not going to make changes. Always changes. They just, they're professional negotiators. That's all they are. I don't even call them good at it. They haven't gotten anything. They got nothing from me. We hit them very hard last night. But we had a deal. What nobody knows, we had a deal. It was a done deal. And then they broke it. They always break it. We've had 10 deals with these people, and we're gonna keep the strait, and we'll probably run it. We'll become the guardian of the strait, and we should be reimbursed for that. When we do that, we're going to be reimbursed because the other nations are very wealthy. They're on our side.
So we have now a position where we're going to have the strait now closed, right? And now we're going to facilitate. So how are we militarily going to take over the strait from the Iranians? We couldn't do it before, but now we're going to do it again? We're going to take over the strait somehow, put our ships in harm's way of being hit by the Iranian missiles and drones? Do we really want to see warships sunk in the Persian Gulf, ladies and gentlemen? I don't think so. I don't believe that's what we want. But there's no rationale for it. How do we maintain that position? How do we say that we have now militarily control of the Strait of Hormuz? We really can't do it. And I'm not saying that to put our military down. I'm just saying we haven't been able to do that yet. What makes us think we are going to do it now? We're talking about a naval blockade again? What did the naval blockade do before? Yeah, we stopped a couple ships, but a lot of ships continued to get through. We didn't have the means of which to do so. So we called ships back, and now we're going to put them back out there? To sit there yet again? To do what? So we're going to put a blockade on the Strait of which is already now closed by the Iranians. It's amazing logic, folks. I think everybody would agree with me on that one. Certainly not the best case scenario of which we want to do. And by the way, I want to play you one more clip. This is from Keith Kellogg. I was going to play this for you on Friday, but I decided to spare your ears the agony of listening to such a low IQ human being. You know Keith Kellogg's position. Everything the United States should do is increase the capability of this war. And listen to the position. Again, these are the people. By the way, he's now removed from his position, but these are the people that are influencing President Trump. Take a listen to this one.
There's a big rule in war about simplicity, and I'll make it really simple for you. I think what they ought to do right now, what I'd recommend to the president is you take that 14-point MOU and you throw it away. And you start to make the Iranians understand that we are not equals in this fight at all. Because what you just said, we've decimated their military forces. We were able to penetrate at will. And say there's three demands we have. One is we're going to send the IAEA to get the enriched uranium and the centrifuges with American support, with no restrictions at all. Number two, we're going to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And if you attack it, we'll attack back. And if you damage any ships, we're going to take the fungible reserves that you have in place, which are in the billions, and pay those shipping companies the cost of either losing a ship or getting damage to a ship. And the third, you're going to lay off your neighbors.
How are we going to do all this? So he already basically says, okay, we're going to get rid of the memorandum of understanding. We've already done that. That was null and void already once we decided to attack again. We don't need to throw it out the window. It's already gone. It's not there. We have no basis for negotiations now, which prolongs the war in general again. The next problem, he says, we're going to take control of the Strait of Hormuz. How? How are we going to get to the Strait of Hormuz and open it up on our own? You risk our ships, you risk our troops. There's safety. Do we really want to see warships being struck inside the Persian Gulf? I don't think so. And we're going to tell them to lay off their neighbors. Well, again, they have the ability to strike all of those countries which facilitate our military bases, our air bases, that allow this war to happen. We already know they want the Qataris themselves, the Saudis have said this. They want the United States to leave. There's really no purpose to have these bases there because they don't protect these countries in which they're in. To make matters worse, only thing Keith Kellogg understands is to do more war. It's almost like listening to a Mumdummy or a Robert Reich or Bernie Sanders talking about more taxation is going to fix everything for the economy. Ridiculousness, right? We have a problem. We must raise taxes. We have to raise taxes on the billionaires, the trillionaires, not the millionaires, because I am a millionaire. I don't want anyone to tax the millionaires. We will stay in a lower tax bracket, but everyone else will pay much, much more money, and that will fix everything. Doesn't work. Never works out, does it, folks? Never does. We pay more taxes now than ever before, and obviously doesn't work. Look how much money we owe in debt. That's money we have spent over what we collect every single year. It's a lost cause. But on another note, that's the same position we have here with the people that are advising Trump. General Jack Keane is the same exact position every time. Well, we need to take Kharkov. Well, we need to do this. Well, it's how are we going to do this? They offer no solution. What happens when we get control of it? How do we keep our warships safe in the region? They can't answer the question. And by the way, how are we going to keep these ships running? We're running out of the oil that's necessary to allow these vessels to continue to work. What are we going to do then when they run out? How are we going to restock on this? We have a major shipping crisis coming from this blockade. And of course, the Iranians now shutting it down yet again when we had a fine deal in place. And I thought it was funny too. He said, oh, we're not going to give them anything. That's what Trump said. We're not going to give them anything. Well, again, that's part of the deal. We're going to give them back the money, which is theirs. Then we have no understanding. We have no organization with them. And that means this war just continues on until we decide to leave. This is not going to sway the Iranians. You taking Kark Island is not going to work. It's going to put our boys in grave danger, which nobody wants to see. I certainly don't want to see that. It would put our vessels in danger if we brought them close enough to the strait, which is why we haven't done that yet. This is why they're sitting, I think it's anywhere between 500 and 700 miles outside of the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, because they don't want to get close enough. To tell you the truth, I don't blame them. It puts them in harm's way. So what is the plan of attack? How are we going to open this up militarily? It hasn't worked yet. So what are we going to do now that's different? We're now trying to bomb nuclear sites. We're now trying to bomb bridges. We're talking about bombing desalination plants. How is this going to work? What does a victory look like? What is the main objective here? Nobody can tell you. All they can tell you is we're dropping more bombs. Well, folks, we can drop more bombs. We've done that already. But it's not working. It's not going to change the government. It's not going to stop the Iranians because they're already attacking us. They're hitting our bases, which are most of them are inoperable right now. We know they've bombed the Fifth Fleet headquarters inside of Doha. We're not stopping them. It's just, right now, it's just a back and forth, and it's not solving anything, folks. It's just prolonging the war. And again, this is a complete misstep by President Trump, sadly enough. But I really had hopes that this memorandum of understanding would at least bring the United States and Iran to the table to work things out, to get better relations, to stop the fighting, to reopen the strait, keep it open, and stop attacking one another. And of course, what do? We decided to drop bombs on them because we decided to allow these vessels, which we had no business directing, through the Omani side of the Strait of Hormuz. Completely ridiculous. We did not have to do that. And we signed off, ladies and gentlemen, that we would allow them to control the strait so long if it was free traffic for everybody, which, by the way, it was. So now we have a grave problem on our hands. What do we do when we run out of oil? And even Newsmax right now is talking about this, folks. We have a recent escalation in hostilities between, of course, the U.S. and Iran. And it will upend the International Energy Agency's forecast of a significant market surplus next year. That's what they said on Friday. Yeah, isn't that nice? So now we have the International Energy Agency now talking about deficits in oil into 2027. This is remarkable. Really it is. This is just peak stupidity at this point. And what they've said is that the global markets now receive some, looks like, well, what they're talking about is 14 million barrels per day of crude flows during the peak of the largest oil supply in the crisis. The IEA said that the global supply rose by 4.1 million barrels per day in June, but remained 9.4 million barrels per day lower in the pre-war levels. So here's what the agency predicts now. They predict that the supply will expand by 7.5 million barrels per day next year after a 3.7 million barrel per day contraction this year. So we have to up the ante of what we're getting out of the strait now to make up for the lost amount of traffic, which is down by 95% since this war began. Again, who was telling you this? Me. I told you this was going to happen. I told you this was going to happen before this war even began. I said, if they close off that strait, you're going to see an oil crisis. You're going to see, obviously, an energy crisis with a liquefied natural gas. We have a helium crisis. We have a fertilizer crisis. We're not getting the right sulfur and urea out to produce the fertilizer we need inside the United States. It's not happening. And again, what do we benefit from it? We benefit nothing, because none of this needed to happen in the first place. That's why I thought it was odd, too. Trump is talking about the nuclear program. They're just automatically talking about nuclear technology at this point. Oh, we talked to them when they were negotiating for 11 hours. Well, again, the Iranians said they aren't even going to discuss nuclear with us until we get everything negotiated on the first 14 points, of which mostly they dictated because they're winning the conflict. Just facts, folks. Just facts. But now we have other facts in our hand. What do we do next? So we've got to get more oil out of the Persian Gulf now. And we're going to have deficits leaving into 2027. Here's what they say as well. It says the IEA's 2027 forecast implied that supply will outweigh demand by 4.62 million barrels next year from an 860,000 barrels per day deficit this year. So again, we have these deficits this year. As long as this war continues on, the number of deficits will now increase now. Oh, my God. Provided that producers can even restart the fields and refiners can resume normal production shipments. Well, that's not going to happen because a lot of them are offline right now. Some of them have been damaged by the Iranians. And some of them are going to take about a year to even get back up and running. That means they have to fix certain parts of the refinery to make sure that it can all work. We have damages on, I think, a liquefied natural gas facility inside of Qatar. They're estimating it's going to take about a year to get back up and running at a normal pace. So this isn't, again, an overnight fix. This isn't just the Strait is open up, now everything's fine. Certainly some refineries are up and running. But to get back to the normal pace and to get back to, again, we need to increase that now. We need to increase those flows. That's simply just not going to happen anytime soon. So the IEA now advises industrial nations seeing the global oil demand falling by 1 million barrels this year before rebounding to the rise to 2 million barrels per day in 2027. Yep. So we've got a supply and demand issue, ladies and gentlemen. It's obviously a major problem for the global economy because the world runs on oil, folks. Whether you like to admit it or not, the world runs on it, and we have to have it as we want to have a successful economy and commerce to go along with it. We're simply shutting things down. Again, what are these vessels going to run on? Sunlight? Windmills? What are we going to do? I mean, the reality is going to set in hard, folks, when it happens. But I think very, very soon, depending on how Trump wants to approach this, if we decide to continue to dig into the oil reserves or if we decide to end this conflict once for all and really start to buy more oil from Mexico and Canada alike, because we have to have it. We have to refill these oil reserves as well. And there's going to be a very, very big drop in the output from these facilities in the country, which again is not going to be good for our GDP. 70% of the refineries in the United States deal with this heavy, sour crude oil. And they're not getting that supply in right now. So expect price to go up, folks. We're seeing the prices of oil per barrel continue to go up. And that's going to happen as time goes on. And we see no end to this war right now, at least. I do want to talk about another important article because, again, Khanna, by the way, was visiting the West Bank, and he and his crew that were with him were stopped by this armed Israeli settlers. They ended up detaining him and other U.S. citizens during this recent tour in this region. And he was not happy about this, as one could imagine. And he said that they were provoking him. They were near this village called Cherbet Zanuta, in the southern West Bank. They were carrying U.S.-made rifles. Isn't that nice? Right? These Israeli settlers were carrying our weaponry and accosting American citizens. The settlers then kicked the van's tires. They filmed the scene, laughing at Khanna and his crew. And this is what he relayed to the Western press as he got back. I think he was detained for 75 minutes after the settlers first stopped the group. Then they were actually allowed to leave. So he got into a back and forth, though, with Jillian Turner on Fox News, who tried to, I guess, deflect on what he was saying. She was accusing him of not following the coordination of the IDF, which, by the way, I don't think he needs to do. But he set the record straight. I'm going to play you, this is a long clip, but I'm going to play you just a little bit of it so you can understand exactly what took place. And again, when I saw this on Saturday, too, I shook my head and said, wonderful, right? This is just, again, you see them treating American citizens with passports like this. Imagine how they treat the actual Palestinians in the West Bank who don't have that luxury as well. Take a listen.
Why did you not coordinate with Israel on this, knowing they're staunch allies of the United States, knowing the recent history of the October 7th massacre? And most importantly, why did you decline to meet with Jewish survivors of the Hamas terror attacks on October 7th?
The ambassador is lying. We did inform
Sir,
Israel.
at a certain point, if everybody is lying, but just, sir, you have now said the ambassador is lying, the IDF is lying, the U.S. Embassy is lying. Who, at a certain point...
No, the U.S. Embassy I praised. I praised the U.S. Embassy. The ambassador is blatantly lying. And the reality is that we coordinated with Israel. How did I get through and back? I have been to Israel 3 times before. I met with Prime Minister Netanyahu before. I met with Prime Minister Bennett. If you ask John and Rachel Poland, who lost their son, Hirsch, tragically, I was fighting for Hirsch's release as a hostage. I met with them many times. But I told the Israeli government that I wanted to go on a Palestinian-led trip to the West Bank because I had been to 3 trips to Israel. I had gotten Israel's perspective, and that this trip I was going to go to the West Bank for a Palestinian-led look for 3 days. They knew that. And the point is that just because an American politician wants to get the side of Palestinians, that does not give Israel the right to have violent settlers detain Americans with a passport, that gives Israel the right to have IDF detain us. It's not just me. I mean, Tucker Carlson and others have said that this is outrageous, that this is happening to an American citizen. I've traveled to China. I've traveled to Saudi Arabia. I've traveled all over the world. Never has this happened to American passport holders. And you may disagree with me on my ideology, but as Americans, we...
All right, so he's making the case here. He was stopped. They were mocking him, and they got into a back and forth about the IDF stopping him. I guess there was a press release by the IDF saying they never did that, and he was saying, yes, they did. It's on video. We have it. So there's a back and forth going on about that. But let me just point to something that I've said to you time and time again, which, again, I think holds true here. UN Charter Article 242. What does that mean, folks? I've said it to you time and time again. The provision states specifically the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict. This goes back to 1967 during the Six-Day War. And it reaffirms the principles of the UN Charter, particularly Article 2.4, which prohibits the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. So why do we have young men with machine guns going up to a U.S. citizen who's traveling on their way in a territory in which they can be in? Now, he says very specifically, he says, we told them where we were going. By the way, I've heard other people say this as well, too. They go into the West Bank and they see people shooting at other people. I mean, it's a chaotic place. I don't recommend anybody going there on their own accord. Certainly, it'll be very, very dangerous. But this is what the accord says. Why is the IDF even in the West Bank? They're not supposed to be in the West Bank. And one of the other provisions in this says, too, the termination of all claims of states of belligerency and recognition of the sovereignty, the territorial integrity, and all political independence of states in the area. So that'd be the West Bank and Gaza. We're talking about the 1967 borders, which again have been depleted since then. You see the presence of the IDF in both locations. And the final part about this just states very, very clearly, allowing them, again, the people that have lived in this region for quite some time now, to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries, free from threats or acts of force. Now, this obviously is violated on a daily basis. But it also calls for this, folks, and I think this is where Ro Khanna gets it right. And again, I don't always agree with Ro Khanna, but he's right here. Calls for freedom of navigation through international waterways. So emphasizing a just settlement of refugee problems. It also supports measures including demilitarized zones. So why do we have people with guns stopping people moving freely on their way? To guarantee territorial inviolability and political independence. So if Khanna wants to go into the West Bank and meet with Palestinians to speak with them, he's able to do so. He doesn't need to explain anything to them. He already did when he got there. He said, I'm going to be traveling through the West Bank. Here's my documentation. They say, okay. And now he's stopped by Israeli settlers in the region, which has about roughly, I believe, 3 million Palestinians living there with a couple 100,000 Jewish settlers, if I'm not mistaken. So why are they stopping him? He's just moving on his way. But notice Jillian Turner says, our staunch ally. Oh, okay. Well, they're stopping Americans with machine guns, folks, of which, by the way, we pay for. And we can go through the other examples of what takes place in the region, the burning of the Christian cemetery, the St. George Cemetery, the burning of olive trees and groves and what have you, stealing of property, and no one says a damn thing about it. But Khanna got to experience a little bit of that up close in front, so hopefully he'll be releasing more footage of that to, again, set the record straight about his recent trip to the West Bank. And by the way, folks, just to close out today's show, let's talk about our own interest inside the United States. This comes from the New York Post. The Chinese Communist Party obviously is plainly exploiting the opaque ownership structure of many multinational tech companies to fund far-left political subversion all across the United States. Yes, yes, and 100% yes. And one of these people, by the way, this Neville Roy Singham, who's a Shanghai-based Maoist tech millionaire, this guy's notorious for the funding a lot of these outfits, like the Crypto-Communist People's Forum, for instance, which organizes radical protests, all support of Hamas terrorism, according to this article, protecting what, again, this article claims the butchers who control Iran. So again, they're controlling certain narratives. Again, his wife is involved in very extreme groups called Code Pink. Again, they're big players in the Democratic Socialist of America who are very prominent with Zoran Mamdani. We see how stupid he is, right? And they're backing all this. So you have foreign nations backing the interest of communism inside of the United States. By the way, that's what the Democratic Socialist of America is. It's all communism. That's the end result of it. Now, they sell it as democratic socialism to make it sound like you actually have a say. You don't have a say. You just have what they tell you. That's what it comes down to. That's how everything starts. Let's never forget Lenin said, very succinctly, socialism's goal is communism. And truer words have never been spoken before. So they're funding lots of money into all this. That's what the article begins to say. But they're definitely setting the narrative in many institutions, certainly funding a lot of these candidates, these far-left candidates now that are taking over the Democratic Party. And I guess I just want to close on this note. When we think about where we are as a people, and we just celebrated our 250 years of this great nation of which we find ourselves in, and we're blessed to be in, where do we go from here? When we see this taking place, when we see a foreign government, among many other governments too, by the way, that are pushing various narratives, that are pushing communism and these candidates to take over our institutions. What do we say about this? We had the Communist Control Act of 1954 signed by Dwight D. Eisenhower, which outlawed the Communist Party and criminalized membership and or support for it, aimed at preventing communists from holding office. This is what these people are, these Democrat socialists, and the support for it. And certainly influence in our labor institutions. That's another situation we seldom talk about today, but the communism that exists in a lot of these labor unions themselves. Again, pushing the exact same damn thing. Folks, it's time to bring back HUAC too. By the way, the House Un-American Activities Committee, my God, we created it to obviously show there was disloyalty and these subversive actions inside the United States, to check this, to make sure that we don't have this happening inside our country, this subversion that we find ourselves in, unfortunately. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. I appreciate it so much. Make sure you're staying prepped with food, water, medicine, anything you need to do. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you back here tomorrow, as always. Until then, be good, stay busy. God bless.